Hi guys, it's Mandy from Mandyleeplays, and in today's video, I want to explore the various different tropes that we most often see in our favorite RPGs slash JRPGs and which ones I really don't like. But before we get started, I would like to define what a trope is. I feel like that's important because some people might misconstrue it as something else, so I just want to lay out the basic definition. In storytelling, a trope is a common theme, motif, or narrative that you see throughout a story. And tropes often appear throughout any form of media, whether it be video games, movies, TV shows, books, all of them. It's a basic form of storytelling and it makes it easier for the storyteller to tell a story using a trope. When used effectively, this really enhances the narrative and make it more relatable to different types of people. Conversely, it can also become repetitive if not presented well. Whether celebrated or critiqued, tropes are an essential part of JRPGs and storytelling as a whole. While yes, some tropes are more comfortable and familiar, sometimes they could get overdue a lot to the point where it's just straight up annoying. Now here comes the part where I identify the most common tropes that I really don't like in JRPGs. And please let me know your favorite tropes or least favorite tropes in the description down below. Oh, and if you end up liking this video, then please hit that like button, and if you end up loving my channel, I do a lot of JRPG content, then please consider subscribing. Now the first trope that I despise is amnesia. Wait, what was I doing? I have many gripes with this trope since it's overused to death. And I get it, it's an easy way for you to establish a new character without fleshing out their backstory, and it has the character going through this journey, discovering themselves, and the player could do that as well. So I get the plot convenience that is amnesia, but it's still annoying. Number one, because it's usually a very selective amnesia. So the player remembers how to fight and how to even cast magic and all that stuff, but they just conveniently forget the story points of their lives. It's just so contrived. Typically, a character's memory is suppressed because they fall in one of these categories. The first one being they hit their head a bit too hard and that clouded their memory a bit, so they might remember little things but nothing too bad. B, their true destiny needs to be hidden away because it would cause great destruction. Or C, which is probably the most case, they lost their memories because the writer of the game said so. Now, I'm not gonna bash every amnesiac plotline. There's some that do it well. One great example that comes to mind is Final Fantasy VII. Now, spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, Cloud does not remember his traumatic experiments because he was being tested on and all the trauma that went with it. So it's perfectly understandable and it fits the story on why Cloud does not remember anything. And it makes Cloud a more tragic hero in a sense and an unreliable narrator once you discover his memories are not really legit. That, in my opinion, is the best way to do an amnesiac story and is used pretty well for the narrative. But then there are just some that are just like, oh my god, I hit my head, where are my memories? Oh well, let me go on this adventure without knowing anything. You can feel the writers writing that in there and it doesn't feel natural at all. Now, I'm not an expert on writing nor writing for a video game, but I know a good story when I see it, and most of the times writers just don't take the time to explore why they have no memory and instead just use it to make all the progression easier, which honestly is really lazy. And when you see an amnesiac character, you just know there's like a plot twist that is supposed to happen, because if not, then why does the character have no memories? So it just ruins the overall story, structure, and intrigue that we have with the characters. And you just know at the end of the game, they're probably related to the evil person, or they're probably royalty of some kind, and they just wanted to hide it from you because it's more exciting that way apparently. Looking at you, Aaliyah from Fire Emblem Engage, I mean, the same thing could be said with Fire Emblem Awakening, honestly, and Fire Emblem Fates. Fire Emblem uses this a lot, and it also hinges on the side characters not knowing who this person is, and that could get a little bit sloppy. But hey, it's an easy way to tell a story, and we see it a lot in JRPGs because it's just like over-liable. A good subversion of this is when the character has amnesia and they get to the end but then figure out that they're just a nobody who just picked up a sword and can use it, and that their true strength was themselves, not who they were. Or if the amnesia is self-inflicted, so mentally they just can't remember their past because they don't want to remember their past. I feel like that point has a lot of nuance and story potential. The point of the trope is to give you a puzzle and the pieces, but not like the full picture because they want you to figure it out. So I don't have a problem with amnesia as a whole, useful as a writing trope, but it's just overused in my opinion, and not in a really good way either. Let's move on to my next point, and that is fighting a deity, or more commonly known as punching God in the face. We all played games like this where it's literally the characters are battling against a deity of some kind, and you just sit there and be like, how did this happen? How did we get here, gang? Now, punching God in the face was kind of coined from Shin Megami Tensei because you literally punch God in the face. JRPGs love throwing gods or deities as the final big boss, and I can understand why. They're like the figurehead of the whole society and how it's dictated, so it's no wonder why the end goal is the protagonist taking that down. And in most cases with these games, the gods are usually evil antagonists and are ready to kill humanity in some sort of way. You know how it goes. The villain spends like 80% of the game scheming, then absorbs some ancient artifact for forbidden magic, and Viola, they ascend to godhood. If you're thinking of Final Fantasy VI, then you will be correct. That's a good example of this point. Though I love Final Fantasy VI, it does use this trope. And your band of scrappy characters have to go and give this god a lesson. And bonus points for gods who have this whole monologue about how human civilization is a failure and they want to do it again or something. Now, despite the overuse of this trope, I actually really enjoy it. It's a good way to end off a game. It's really satisfying sometimes, not gonna lie. Now, the issue is that these gods often boil down to the same cliche: very smug, world-hating, and just detached from humanity. My favorite of these stereotypical godhood things is Zanza from Xenoblade Chronicles. His final confrontation with Shulk and the party is less about brute strength and more about challenging his worldviews. Shulk's rejection of Zanza's control and his decision to create a future free from God's service does offer a powerful thematic climax, showing how humanity, or any living creature, should be in control of their own destinies. Now, Zanza is the more better uses of this trope because it does challenge the worldview of the characters and by extent the players. But admittedly, this trope has kind of lost their luster, where most JRPG gamers kind of expect that to happen. So how do we improve this? Well, number one, not every god needs to be removed of emotions. I feel like most of these final villains are just like robotic computer type of characters, and it doesn't always have to be that way. And while they might resent humanity, they don't really want to destroy it. They're just very lonely. So having a perspective where I just want to have fun with everybody else is, you know, really relatable, even if they're a god of some sort. Or the god or deity figure is actually a good force instead of a negative force. I don't know, I feel like they could twist this trope in so many ways and make it really interesting. It doesn't always have to end with a god deity that you have to take down. Or if there is, adding more depth to it would make the narrative way more powerful. Oh, and extra points if you show the results after the deity has been defeated. There's gonna be some adjustments that have to be taken place. Overall, I'm just tired of showing up to these deities and doing the same song and dance. I want something more divine with this narrative. Now for my next point, what is the first thing you think about when someone mentions anime or JRPGs? The power of friendship. The power of friendship is the ultimate trump card when it comes to any JRPG. So when the chips are down and the world is literally crumbling, bam, the power of friendship comes in clutch every time. The power of friendship is here to save the day. Hooray! Okay, there's more to this. I'm done with my joke. This trope is iconic, not only in JRPGs, but in anime. And I think like the shonen anime series is just built on that foundation of the power of friendship. It's just expected. Now, this trope is actually pretty nice and heartwarming, and it does have some basis to reality because when you have more connections with people, you tend to do better. So I get it. But in that same note, writers tend to use it as a shortcut and often provides the protagonist very convenient loopholes to the system, and it often skips over the complex situations for a quick resolution. If you're gonna pull the power of friendship card, you better have it where it somewhat makes sense, because it just feels like a cheat. I'm sorry. It does sometimes. Now, admittedly so, I might be coming off as cold or distant, but I do believe in the power of friendship. It should be used in some scenarios, but it shouldn't like literally break the whole narrative just because. And one of my favorite series of all time, Kingdom Hearts, uses this whole power of friendship as a tangible power kind of way. Now, Sora being the way he is, I understand why he would have so much stock into connections. And if you played any Kingdom Hearts games, connection is probably the second most powerful thing in that universe. So with a lot of the scenarios in Kingdom Hearts, I kind of overlooked the power of friendship thing, but there are some instances where it just gets freaking wild. There was this scene from Dream Drop Distance where Zora was like, me and my friends, and then you see the villain just look and it's all his friends next to him, and I guess it's very powerful. So the villain just gets out of there. That win just felt unearned. And sometimes I think the series is just self-aware of that fact and uses it in the most comedic ways. A good example of the power of friendship has to be with the Persona series. I feel like they use friendships really well, and the power of friendships and what they have to offer is practically baked in the gameplay. This comes in the form of social links, which is a system that ensures that your bond with each party member and other different characters grows stronger over time throughout the game. Still, it works because Persona leans into the more emotional payoff aspect, making the trope feel like a celebration of all the relationships you build throughout the game. Anyways, the power of friendship does not always have to be cheesy or just come out of nowhere. It could be done right. And the trope does hold a lot of emotional power because a lot of people can relate or resonate with that idea of creating connections makes you in turn stronger. It should be a payoff and not a shortcut. And finally, the final trope that I wanted to speak on, and I'm finally breaking my silence, the silent protagonist. Well, I was kind of kidding when I said breaking my silence. I talk about this a lot, especially on my live streams. I loathe the trope, and here's why. Silent protagonist is like that one friend who reads the chat but never replies. It's just assumed that they're okay with everything you say. I don't know, it kind of falls into that uncanny valley because most people like to talk, and that's a good way of knowing somebody. So when these characters don't talk, it's kind of like, do I know you? Do I really know you? So in case you don't know, which I highly doubt it, the silent protag is what it says. They don't talk. Sometimes they talk in universe, but not to the players. And they usually just grunt or nod. That's basically it. So this was common in a lot of older JRPGs where they just didn't have the budget to really have a voice character, or they wanted the character to be a blank slate, so the players add their own characteristics to the character, which is kind of lazy in the character development department, just saying. While in some instances this trope works, it often leads to this uncanny valley, especially in modern games, where the protagonist is just kind of creepy in a way because it's just silent. Your mom is dead, they don't say anything. Your dad is dead, they don't say anything. It's weird, and sometimes it can offer some hilariously awkward situations. Oftentimes, characters will pour their hearts out to the protagonist, spilling deep secrets or asking life-changing questions, only to be met by a blank stare. I don't see why anyone doesn't think that's creepy. One of the biggest examples of a silent protagonist with the capital S is Chrono from Chrono Trigger, and he never utters a single word throughout his whole time traveling adventures. Now, I don't know if he says stuff behind the scenes and the player just doesn't listen to it, which I think is the case. Blank slate characters are usually just blank characters. They have no characterization and becoming more of an NPC than actual NPCs. And for story reasons, that just doesn't really go as well. I like my protagonists to have their own backstory, own history, own secrets, and a voice in their own game. Chrono's actions do speak volumes for him. In the game, he ultimately sacrifices himself for his friends in the world, but when I was playing the game, I wasn't really sad that he died. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I really didn't feel anything because he's not a character to me, and my lack of caring for this character does ultimately come to the lack of dialogue from said character. Frankly, I was more invested with his friends. If I lost any of the other party members, I would have been wrecked, but with Chrono, I was just like, good thing it wasn't the other characters kind of vibe. I know that's harsh, but it's kind of true. You know it's true. Now, a good example of how it's done right is with Persona 5 and Joker. So Joker is a silent protagonist, but he does talk. Not only does he have dialogue with his companions that you actually see, he also uses his voice sometimes. But he still fits in the silent protagonist category because he doesn't talk most of the time. So he comes off as like a more quiet person than a silent protag. Now, what's a good way to improve this whole trope? One is to use their silence as a storytelling tool, not a default design choice. By making the silence an integral part in the character's journey, it feels less like a blank slate and more like an intentional narrative decision. Breaking their silence on key moments can also make the trope more impactful, proving that actions might be a little bit more powerful than words. So while I don't like the trope and I think it shouldn't be done as a whole, if they're gonna keep doing it, I feel like these changes will add more to the whole silent protag trope and maybe make it something special. In conclusion, tropes are the backbone of any good story, and whether we love them or hate them, they're just gonna be here to stay for like the foreseeable future of humanity. And I honestly feel as the genre evolves, we will see different takes from these old tropes that we've grew up with. And the purpose of this video is just to highlight the ones I don't really like and how they can be changed. If you have a trope that you like, please let me know in the comments, or if you don't like one, please let me know as well. Anyways, you can follow me on my socials in the description down below. I hope you guys have a fantastic, wonderful day, and as always, play a good game. Peace, peace.